This is a message by Lumen. Welcome to Easily Entertained. My name is Bryson O, and I am on the severed floor of Lumen Industries. Recently, a show by the name of Severance has been kind of giving us severed employees a bad name. But seeing as we do like to put a positive spin on things here at Lumen, we would like to go ahead and check out the show just in case there are some good parts about it, as it has been getting quite a lot of positive attention. So let's dive in to Severance. What am I wearing? Okay. Okay, well, I guess we're talking about Severance now. I watched the show. It was fantastic. I absolutely loved it. No complaints here. It was truly amazing. And we're only on season 2 so far. We just finished that. And season 3, I believe, is in the works. They have a writer's room already going. And yeah, I'm excited for more Severance. The show has just been my little obsession over the last little while as season 2 has been coming out, because I binged the first season and then thankfully season 2 had started coming out as well. So that was fantastic for me. And what I think kind of helped that so much more is just that its story. Fantastic. Okay, if you haven't watched Severance yet, let me give you kind of a brief rundown so you know the idea of Severance, but you should also probably at least watch the show or have more of an understanding of Severance to continue on. Anyways, Severance is a mystery of these employees at a company called Lumen that they've gone through this procedure called severed, or severance I believe is like the official term, and they're severed employees. And that basically means their work self and their life self, two completely different people. Like their mind has been split like geographically, so when they're at work, there's one side, there's their work self, and anytime they're not at work, they're their normal self. It's super interesting, and characters are often kind of left in the dark. The severed employees are trying to break out, essentially. Like, they're not really liking their lives as basically indentured servants. And yeah, that's basically the whole thing. But it's kind of a mystery where they keep releasing things and you get a little more information. You're like, okay, why did these people choose to be severed? And then you find out more later. That's kind of the basic premise of it. And I love how it is structured. Okay, typically mysteries in anything are usually structured in a way where you have questions and you have answers. And usually it's kind of lining up, like you're having about an even split of questions and answers, and it will keep going until the very end of the series. Interestingly though, and I don't know if everyone likes this, but I find it interesting because I think it keeps me hooked for even later on in the series, because, you know, I still have a lot of questions at the end of season 2 and I want them all answered. So that will keep me interested for season 3. But essentially, you know, you have your inciting question. What is this thing? Okay, in this case, what is severance? What does severed mean? And then you learn what it means, but then you're learning, okay, why are people choosing to be severed? What is the bigger picture behind the inventing of severance? You see Mark's wife, Gemma, who is Miss Casey in the severed world, but they don't know she's Mark's wife. So why is she there? Why is Mark working on specific files? Why did Helena Egan decide to become LER for like publicity stuff? Why is Dylan there? Why is Irving there? That kind of stuff, where it is question, answer. And in Severance, there are usually more questions than answers. I saw a video essay of someone talking about this, and they didn't really care for it. And it was a great video. Okay, I will link it down in the description. They kind of talk about why they don't like it. Still, they make great points. I do like it the way it is being structured like this. And I think that's just because I know the show is going on longer. Like, yes, if these were the only 2 seasons we got and it ended like how it ends, yeah, I would be furious. I'd be like, well, I have too many questions unanswered right now, and so I would want some clarity on those things. But because we are getting at least one more season, I think they have a plan for 4. I could be wrong. But because they have a plan for more seasons, I think I'm okay with having more questions right now, because I'm seeing it as like a bigger picture. Because like in a movie, you usually have your first act where a lot of questions are developed, and then in your second act, you have more questions developed, but some are answered from the previous one. Some of the current questions are answered. And then it's the third act where everything wraps up entirely. So say they were doing 3 seasons, that's how I'm assuming they would take it, is they're trying to build up as much interest as possible, and then everything will be answered. And I know like each episode is kind of treated in a similar manner, where you have a lot more questions at the end of the episode than you did at the beginning. So that can kind of break it a little bit. It just feels like you don't have a release, and that can be a little bit annoying, I feel like, because sometimes in certain shows I feel like it makes it almost like filler, whereas in Severance I don't think that's the case, because other times, like other shows, they're making questions just so that you continue watching, and it's just filler. Whereas Severance, because the lore of this world is so massive, that is why I feel like it's so interesting the way they structured it, is because they want you to keep going. They want to explain everything, but that does result in you having more questions. Why is Lumen and Kier kind of like this cultish religion type thing? Or why did Miss Cobell have an obsession with okay, these are questions that you are very clearly shown and you want to know the answers to. And it takes a while to learn why. And that I just find interesting. Even the episodes where I'm like, oh, this wasn't my favorite episode, there is so much value in them still. Like in season 2, they kind of have like a episode where they focus on Miss Cobell a little bit more, and that was the episode that I probably didn't pay attention to the most, and that could have been for a number of reasons. I think primarily because of how it was shot and the way my room is set up. It's like harder to see because it's just so dark most of the time. But structure-wise and content-wise, I never feel bored watching Severance. I just get more engaged. I have questions and I want them answered. And then I'm like, oh, I got the answer. And then something happens that makes me question what the answer actually is. And I love that about Severance. I think it's awesome. I think it's a very interesting way for them to push it further to, like, you know, keep you from having that cathartic release of information where you're like, oh, I got the answer to this, and you have to continue on. I don't think it works for every show, but I do think for Severance it works. And so that's probably one bit of their story that I'm just a huge fan of.
Under my literal nose unfolded a human drama of danger and intrigue.
Now, usually I kind of talk about more aspects, but the story and lore of Severance is just my favorite thing about this show, because there are a lot of good things. Okay, their cinematography, fantastic. Okay, I love the way they have like this kind of retro vibe that they were inspired by. I watched some behind the scenes stuff, but they were talking about like their visual side of things. Anyways, super interesting. I love it. It feels original when you're watching it, and it's just, I love it. Okay, their sound design, their visuals, their music, everything, it's all so good. But their story, oh my gosh, it's so good. And I think, like I said, structure as well, but I also really think it is due to the originality of the show. Okay, I don't feel like we get as many original shows nowadays. Like, sure, we do. I feel like we do get a lot of original stuff still, but not everything original is really thought out for that long. And it feels like the showrunners, I believe it was Dan Erickman, he was the one who wrote it and he pitched it to Ben Stiller's production company, and that's how it got moving. I believe he had a plan. And so he was thinking about all this stuff, and that I feel like really suits an original story more than sometimes other shows have, is because it feels like it has a game plan. It feels like it's going somewhere, and it's a story that we haven't really been told before. It has elements from other kinds of stories, but everything culminated together is original, and it's like that idea of a work-life balance, and it's like, okay, how do we push this to a whole story that is so interesting to me? Because you can just break it up and be like, okay, so work people don't know anything about life, and then we have to give them their own personalities that are very similar to their outside selves, but they're also a little bit different. They have different kinds of relationships. They do different things. They think about the world differently because they don't have the same educational background as the people outside. Like, they have a basic cognitive function, but they are not like, oh, I'm aware of geography, I'm aware of history. It's just they're a blank slate. And I just love it. I find it so interesting and it's so engaging. Okay, that is something about originality that has to be pushed, is it has to be engaging. And I don't mean like TikTok level of engaging where, I need to be stimulated every 10 seconds in order to pay attention to something. No, it's not that kind of engaging. I mean engaging in the story. Okay, like I said before, there's a question, I want an answer. I want some catharsis as to the response. Like, there's like a duality to originality, because sometimes being too original can be a bad thing, but sometimes being too original can be a really good thing. Okay, I feel like take example, it's not it is a pretty original property, like Stranger Things. Like, I don't say everyone, a lot of people like Stranger Things, and a lot of people don't. But that's kind of like the duality of originality, is because some people like it and some people don't. And like Stranger Things takes a lot of inspiration from Dungeons and Dragons and 80s horror and a whole bunch of stuff like that. And it all culminates into one thing. And Severance is a very similar kind of thing, and less in its story structure and more on the visual side, whereas the story is fairly original, while also, sometimes taking elements from other kind of media, I would say. But it has a very similar effect to Stranger Things. I feel like some people really like it, and some people are like, I don't freaking understand this at all. And I'm not saying it's like a high IQ show, but it is a show that you're like, well, I have to sit down and pay attention to this. And I love that in a show. I love being able to have a show where I can sit down and watch. Sometimes, sure, I like something that can be background noise, but I think I like it more when it's a show that I can sit down and watch. Maybe it will become background noise later after I've watched it 2 times through, so I have everything memorized and can just kind of go. Great, I can do that. That would be awesome. But I like when my first time viewing, I have to be able to sit down and just watch. I don't want to look away. I can't do anything else because I might miss something. That is the kind of show Severance is. And I think you only get that when it's an original kind of show. And, sometimes I said only. That's not necessarily true. You can have something that's not original and still be very engaging. We have docudramas, we have we have adaptations, we have sequels, we have a whole bunch of different stuff. I said it is only, not really. I think it is best achieved. That might be better. I think it's best achieved when it's an original idea. An original idea is something that people can gravitate towards because it's something they haven't seen before. Sometimes people like to see things they have seen before. That's great. There's nothing wrong with that. It's like Marvel superhero shows. We've seen that kind of stuff before, but we still find it engaging. That's not what I'm saying, Like the previous episode, we talked about Invincible. Great show. It's not necessarily original in every aspect of it, but it's very fun and it's very engaging. We love it. But a truly like original kind of show is going to be, I think, even more engaging than something that is taking aspects from stuff that we are already aware of. But that's kind of why I love Severance, is because it is so original. Okay, so now I talked about the story a lot. Now, the big thing I probably want to talk about is the cinematography, because I glanced about it briefly in the previous section. But the cinematography, I think, parallels the story in fascinating ways. So, the Severed, their floor at Lumen, everything is bright, ceiling lights everywhere, everything's top lit. You don't have a lot of depth, like there is some, but it's like there's not a lot of shadows, so it doesn't feel like things have a lot of depth to them. Whereas when you're outside, things are usually at nighttime, or like they're in areas that are kind of dark, and it is very intentional. Like I said earlier, I was watching some stuff on like their like visual development and how they decided how they wanted it to look, and it was interesting. Because, so the way the Severed are, they're kind of left in the dark, which is hilarious because that's not what their world is. Their world is a lot of light, but that is intentional. It's meant to lead them on. You have these characters that have this maze, they have this maze that they're working in that is like a maze of the mind, essentially. And it's bright, and they feel like they know everything about their job, and they're like, oh, this is what everything is. Life is so simple down here. We don't have to worry about the complications of outside. But in reality, the darkness that is outside is what they are missing out on. That's why everything outside is so dark, is because it's from the Severed's perspective. And that's awesome. I love that they're able to do that, because you would think that it would be more about the people not severed, not severed, but like the outies. That's what they call them. I don't know how I took this long to call them that. The people in the work, innies, the ones on the outside, the ones that chose to be severed, outies. Okay, make sense? Great. I don't know how I took that long to actually discuss that. Anyways, so they're outies. You would think it's mostly about them. And to a degree, it is. But the show is literally called Severance. It's going to be about the severed characters, because these characters, like I said before, are a blank slate. And so if you make it from their perspective and how they're trying to break free of their forced slave prison, that's pretty interesting. And you have it reminds me a lot of like Midsummer in the way it's shot, which is hilarious because Midsummer's outside, but it is very much that bright culty type thing where it's so bright that you can't see past it. So that is what is blinding you from the truth. And that's what it's like for the Severed characters. And you have all these little weird cultish type situations, like even when they go outside to like their little camp retreat type thing that happens in season 2, still feels very cult. Like that is very Midsummer-esque, where it is just still very bright outside. They're in the middle of nowhere, so it doesn't feel like they're really getting answers to anything. These are all intentional visual development choices that are meant to mimic the story. You have the like cultish symbolism of like them raising goats to be sacrificed later in the season. You have like all the managers and stuff acting in these very like brainwashed leader type ways where they're like, we're so smart, we can control you type stuff, and they're able to pull it off visually as well as with the story. And oh my gosh, it's so good. It's so good. Okay, I love it. I love Severance so much. It's fascinating. Whether it's the story or the visual side or the sound or the acting, literally all of it, amazing. I absolutely love Severance. It's just so good. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Severance. So let's get into our rating. Once again, it's going to be very much like last week's, that it won't really be a shock. Our easily entertained rating scale, if you don't know, from least to best, it is garbage, once is fine, right mood, quotable, go to, and all day, every day. And it's, like I said, it's obvious. Severance is an all day, every day kind of show for me. I am always engaged. I am always excited to watch the new episode. I would get up, like that's the first thing I do in the morning on Fridays, was watch the new episode of Severance, because it was just so good. Okay, and if you haven't watched it yet, 1, how did you get this far in the video? 2, you better go freaking watch it, because it's just that good. But yeah, that was my thoughts on Severance. So that is it for this episode of Easily Entertained. If you enjoyed, please leave a like and subscribe to be notified of new episodes when they release every Tuesday. And if you have any suggestions for entertainment properties that you'd like to hear me talk about, comment below and I just might talk about them. But until next time, bye.